What is an American doing behind enemy lines? It's unexpected, but unexpected things have happened in this town. I've nurtured a crop of good souls here. They circulated petitions and protest. They yearn for freedom of speech and religion. They learned American ideals from me. They live the doctrine of my religious order, the Passionists. They know that pain binds us all, regardless of nation or race. Protecting them from Nazism was hard enough, but I never imagined the nightmare I'm facing now. The SS have left a mass grave nearby. It's horrific. The Americans have arrived. They're holding the town responsible. The townspeople have orders to wash and clothe 140 bodies, make a coffin for each, dig a grave trench, hold a funeral ceremony. We have 24 hours to see all this through. 24 hours. And if we fail, the Americans will execute every German man in this town between 16 and 60. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Help me pull off a miracle.
Good evening. I'm Koch, author of The Sower of Black Field, and I'm here to tell you about the hero at the heart of this story, Father Viktor Koch. He is a member of my family. He is my great-granduncle, that is, my father's 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 brother. He is a native of Sharon, and even more than that, he also comes from St. Rose of Lima, which is the parish that eventually becomes St. Joe's. I'm grateful to my Aunt Carol and to Father Jamie Power and to St. Joe's for this opportunity to tell you about Father Viktor and his story. And tonight I am joined by my father, Gary Koch. We are a father-daughter team.
And it's appropriate that we're doing this presentation together. This has been a family project from the beginning. This story was completely unknown to us until 2003. And what began as a curiosity unfolded into a story, and that story needed to be told.
But with that, let's get started. Okay. So the story of Father Viktor begins with my great-great-grandparents, who moved from Germany to the USA in the 1850s. And to put things into perspective, that's about the time period when it was immediately before the American Civil War. During this time, Nicholas Koch, my great-great-grandfather, immigrated from Germany. His brother Peter and mother Anna came with him, and they all settled in Sharon on Dutch Lane. And during this time period, the city of Sharon has a very large German community. It's a new country to them, but culturally, they feel right at home. And as you can see from this map, the two brothers, Peter and Nicholas, build homes right next to each other. And according to census records, Anna, the mother, lives with Nicholas. So clearly this is a family that has very strong family bonds. And sometime in the 1860s, Nicholas meets another German immigrant, Victoria Elser, my great-great-grandmother. And they marry in 1868 and start a family. And this map also tells another detail about the Koch family. They live close to a church, St. Rose of Lima. And the Kochs are instrumental in founding this parish in 1869. In the next slide, we have an artist's rendition of what this little parish church looked like, and that's what you see on the left. This church grew through the years until 1891, when it was reestablished as St. Joe's and moved to a new site on State Street. My father grew up in Sharon and in St. Joe's Parish, so this is one area where he can speak with much more personal experience than I can.
I do have vivid memories of the old St. Joseph's Church on East State Street, the one you see in the upper right. I was baptized in that church. I attended St. Joseph's Elementary School, and I was in second grade when they tore down the old church in 1963 and began construction on the new church on Case Avenue, the one in the lower right that you see that stands today. My father had installed the plumbing and in the new church, and I remember exploring the unfinished halls while he worked. It felt reverent and just a bit eerie. I'll never forget the day that they lifted the golden statue of Jesus onto the steeple by helicopter. It looked like Christ himself was floating in the sky. St. Joseph's shaped much of my early life. I was an altar boy, and I graduated from Kennedy Christian High School. Life eventually took our family from Sharon, but I've always carried memories of the parish with me. And now, all these years later, Father Viktor's story has brought us full circle.
And it was incredible for me, too, to discover that our family history is so deeply rooted in St. Joe's Parish. I never realized that until this project came along. So now let's talk about the hometown hero and the subject of our presentation. He is born on May 26, 1873. He is the third child and firstborn son to Nicholas and Victoria Koch. In German fashion, the eldest son has the same name as his father, so they named him Nicholas. So to avoid confusion, I'm going to call him young Nicholas to differentiate him from the father Nicholas. And it's easy to see how his environment shapes him during his most formative years. Young Nicholas Koch is born to German immigrants. He lives in a vibrant German community. He learns Germanic culture and language at home. But then he goes to school and learns English and absorbs American values. So basically, he's getting the best of both worlds. And there are stories indicating that he's a precocious child. In school, he's often tapped to help younger kids in class. And St. Rose of Lima, that little stone church, is right down the road. He's accustomed to a church bell ringing out the hours of the day. And he's been born into a family that is deeply rooted in faith. So these factors shape the person that he will become. But another life experience that has an even deeper impact than all of those. Remember that the Kochs have very strong family bonds. Can you imagine the impact of 3 deaths, all in relatively quick succession? The first one is the death of a newborn. By 1880, the family has 5 children, 2 older daughters and 3 young sons, with young Nicholas being the middle child. And on October 31st, 1880, Victoria gives birth to a 4th son, Thaddeus. But very tragically, the baby dies just hours after its birth. And just 6 months later, another death completely shakes the family. Nicholas, the father, contracts typhoid fever. This is a horrific disease to watch. Just Google the symptoms: dangerously high fever, a rash, chills, and delirium. He dies on April 7th, 1881. This means that Victoria now has to support 5 children, all on her own. And you can imagine the impact of a mother who's always away at work. Running the household probably falls to the 2 oldest daughters. And young Nicholas ends up raising his 2 younger brothers. And that's not the end. Just over a year later, young Nicholas loses the grandmother who immigrated with his father and uncle.
That's a lot of hardship for a 7-year-old boy to endure. In the research, it was pretty clear that this experience of loss and hardship impacted his faith and prepared him for the person he would become.
And that is definitely true. In 1889, 3 missionaries visit St. Rose of Lima. These missionaries are from a religious order called the Passionists. This order was founded in 1721 in Italy. In 1867, just a couple of years after the American Civil War, their founder is canonized a saint. His name is St. Paul of the Cross. And at this time in the 1880s, the Passionists are starting to branch out from Italy. They're trying to establish the congregation in new lands.
The Passionists have a really unique message. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, they do. Their theology is focused on the idea that suffering, the human condition, unites us all with Christ on the cross. To the Passionists, Calvary is not just a historical event. These trials and tribulations and worries and stresses that we all deal with every day unite us with a crucified Christ and with the entire living world. We are all bearing crosses. Christ is present in all who suffer, all who are neglected and alone, all who are marginalized by society, regardless of nation, race, creed, and even religion itself. And when we turn to each other in a spirit of healing and compassion, this is God working through us to heal that pain. This is what they preach.
After all that young Nicholas had to endure in his youth, this message clearly has a profound impact.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, young Nicholas has seen pain. He has endured the death of beloved family members. And after what he's been through, you can imagine him wondering, why does God allow suffering? And I know I've asked that question 1,000 times over. And the Passionists don't just give a pat answer, well, it's a mystery. They actually have one. Their answer, this idea that my daily worries and sorrows are connected with the cross of Christ, it completely transformed my own faith. And when I heard it and really processed what that message was saying, it just made sense. And what I love most is this message is universal. It transcends race and country and language and even religion itself. I mean, how profound is that? And if history is any indication, young Nicholas is just as animated by this as I was. Just months after the Passionists visited St. Rose of Lima, 16-year-old Nicholas signed up to join their preparatory school in New York. He was ordained 6 years later, and he became Father Viktor Koch, CP.
Given that we're researching an ancestor 4 generations removed, trying to get to know him, discovering his personality must have been difficult. Tell us about how you overcame that.
Yeah, let me show you a video. So this was a great find. It comes from the Bauer family, who's connected to ours by Father Viktor's sister, Anna Koch Bauer. The Bauers were early adopters of home videos, even all the way back into the 1930s. And thanks to them, I have a couple home videos to share. So I love this one because you get a sense of who Father Viktor was and the company of people that he knew and loved. He loves telling a story. He loves having a really good belly laugh and just igniting the whole room in fits of laughter. And he loves speaking with his hands. You can tell that from the video clip. I mean, he's just a very vibrant personality. So another video. The tenor of this one is different, but it's equally interesting. This clip was recorded in the States, either in Sharon or possibly in Pittsburgh, which would have been the closest Passionist monastery. But right away, you get this feeling of reverence. There's a priest who runs out and removes his cap and bows. And it demonstrates the respect that Father Viktor commanded. He had that on both sides of the Atlantic, in the USA and in Germany, where he eventually becomes a missionary.
And it's worth pointing out some family members are in this video. I see Grandpa Albert Koch, Father Viktor's youngest brother, at the far right. And there's also a priest standing behind Father Viktor, the one in the white hat. It was Father Viktor's cousin, Father Benedict Huck. Everyone called him Huck.
Good observations. Thanks for that. So the next photo that I want to show you, it's different and has a fascinating dimension on Father Viktor and his personality. Oops. The first videos established Father Viktor as warm and cheerful and someone who had earned serious respect from people who knew him. But this photo is very different. To interpret this photo, I fall back on the Germans who know him better than anyone. The Germans are delightfully literal in their way of speaking. In some of the German documentation, they say that Father Viktor uses his full personality to deal with some tough people. Full personality. I wondered, well, what does that mean? But when I look at this photo, I think I understand exactly what it means. This photo was taken in Austria during a procession of some sort. I don't know what set him off, but look at that face. This is a man with a strong backbone. History is going to throw him into a position where he has to deal with Nazis and stare down a furious American commander. Do I think he can handle it? Yes, I do. And in the Sower, I mentioned a few occasions where Father Viktor pulls a bulldog glare. So you're looking at the historical truth here.
Tell us how Father Viktor becomes a missionary and why Germany. Let's take a look there.
Yeah, okay. So Father Viktor was coming into his own as a priest in the aftermath of World War I. It's not surprising that the war had interrupted missionary activity around the world. Many of these men became military chaplains and died on the front lines. And the Pope at the time, Benedict XV, called for a resurgence of missionary activity. The idea for the Passionists to establish a German mission started with another member of the order, Father Valentin Leonard. In the photo on the left, he's the priest that you see standing on the right. The idea faced a lot of skepticism at first. Leaders of the order wanted to send missionaries to places like China, where they had never heard of Christ. I mean, why Germany? It's already a Christian country. And I think Father Viktor looked at the situation in Germany at the end of World War I. The country had to pay these punishing war reparations. Its economy was in shambles. There were no jobs. People were starving. And I think he reflected upon his childhood when he was going through that level of intensity. And he realized you have to process that kind of pain spiritually. You have to see Christ in yourself and in all who surround you and perceive the transcendental bond in that common experience. And he felt that the Passionist message could take root there.
And Father Viktor was the perfect choice for that assignment. He was a German American, born in Sharon and in a German community, and he knew the language and the culture.
Yeah, he really was. He and Father Valentin went to Germany in 1922 and established 3 monasteries. This graphic here shows you the 3 buildings. And this one gives you an appreciation of the geography of where they're located. They opened the first one in Munich in 1923. The second one is in Austria, where they acquire and rebuild a shrine called Mariaschutz. And the third location is a small Bavarian farm town of Schwarzenfeld.
And how is it that this becomes Father Viktor's story? What happened to Father Valentin?
Well, this becomes Father Viktor's story because sadly, Father Valentin dies of cancer in February of 1941.
I see the third location in Schwarzenfeld is really where the greatest part of his story takes place. It's also the setting of the novel you wrote. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Schwarzenfeld really is the heart of his story. So let me show you a few pictures that help explain why. Now, the set of photos that we're looking here tell a momentous story. Let me give you some context. So it's 1933, 1934. The people you're looking at are living in the Great Depression. And as bad as it was in the States, it's far worse here. Because Germany's paying these war reparations, they have no food, no jobs, and that's before the Depression. And things are beyond desperate now. Even a bucket full of money can't buy a loaf of bread. The mere basics of life are beyond their means. And suddenly, this American priest shows up in Schwarzenfeld. He needs to build a new monastery, and he's hiring the locals to build it. And he has American money, not the German money that's worthless, but American money. And today's money, he has millions of dollars at his disposal. He asks, who wants to help me build a monastery? Everybody raises their hands and says, I do. Because finally they have jobs, they have money, they have a means to feed their families. This is the equivalent of Bill Gates arriving in a poor town and pumping millions of US dollars into the economy. So consider the impact of that and think about what is happening in the rest of Germany. At this time, by and large, the German people think that Hitler is the one who's improving their circumstances, but that's not what's happening here. Yeah, and here in Schwarzenfeld, the people are being provided for both on a material and a spiritual level by an American priest. Just stop and think, what does that do to their sense of loyalty?
You know, in establishing these monasteries in Germany during the 1930s, it's clear that he witnessed the rise of Nazi Germany. What kind of challenges did he face as the Nazis gained more control over the country?
That is a good question. And I included these photos because collectively they show the very real oppression that Father Viktor experienced when the Nazis took control of Germany. Now, remember, he came to establish monasteries as centers of Passionist theology. And just a few years after he opened these places, the Nazis shut down 2 of them. The first one is in Munich, and then the second one is in Schwarzenfeld. And those are the photos that you see on the left. When the Nazis evict Father Viktor and his brethren from Schwarzenfeld, he tries to work his connections in the German Catholic Church, but to no avail. He and his brethren are forced to depart as ordered. And at this point, everyone expects him to admit that his mission in Germany is a failure and then return home to the States. But that's not what he does. He defies the eviction by taking up residence in a little flower sacristy in a nearby church. And that's the photo that you see over on the right. And we went to Germany in 2005, and I had a chance to stand in this room right here. It's the size of a walk-in closet. It's shaped like a wedge, maybe about 2 or 3 feet wide at its narrow end, and then maybe about 6 or 7 feet wide at the larger end. And his decision to remain in Schwarzenfeld was basically a demonstration of peaceful protest. And here's the key thing to realize. He has a very loyal following in Schwarzenfeld, as we've revealed. And these people come from a culture where, you obey authority. The authorities tell you to do something and you do it. And they see Father Viktor doing something different. He's showing them that there are other methods of resistance. It's a very valuable lesson to them. And the picture that you see here is me during the 2005 trip in Schwarzenfeld, talking to Father Viktor's parishioners from 1945. I wanted to know more about the impact that his ministry and values had on them. And I'll tell you, I always thought that Germans never wanted to talk about the war years. This right here, this completely surprised me. I never expected this at all. These people wanted to talk to me specifically because I was Father Viktor's kin. And I realized I was getting an extraordinary glimpse into what life was like during that time. And now, as I was listening to their stories, a thought kept on coming back to me. During the war, these people were doing things I never expected Germans to do. It was clear to me that Father Viktor had a profound influence over them. He instilled American values and Passionist theology during a time when the Nazis were promoting loyalty to the right and an outrageous level of prejudice. Every day, these people in Schwarzenfeld had a beloved leader telling them, Christ is present in all who suffer, all who are persecuted and marginalized and alone. This town was a battleground between very different ideologies. That blew my mind. And I realized this story is about so much more than an American saving Germans from Patton's Third Army. There is a much larger faith story in which Passionist theology and American values protected the humanity of these people. And that's the real reason why you want to read The Sower of Black Field. This presentation here is just giving you the historical background, but to get that larger faith story, you have to read the novel.
And you've mentioned about Father Victor saving the town of Schwarzenfeld on a few occasions in this presentation. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the story of these events begins with an atrocity. Let's touch upon that. First, all of that we're talking about here, it all starts in April 1945. Patton's Third Army is starting to surge very, very deep into Germany. And the SS, who are managing concentration camps in the South, realize that the Americans are getting closer and closer. They do not want the Americans liberating their prisoners. And so they begin herding their prisoners, especially their Jewish prisoners, onto trains to evacuate them. One of these camps is Flossenburg. It's about 40 miles north of Schwarzenfeld. On April 15th, several trains leave the camp, and one train with about 750 prisoners follows the route that you see here. During the trip, it gets strafed 3 times by American low-flyers. Now, the American pilots have been told that any train crossing German territory is probably carrying enemy troops and supplies to the enemy front. All trains must be stopped. They have no clue that it might be carrying Jews. And the worst of these attacks happens in Schwarzenfeld's train station. The engine is completely destroyed, and some of the prisoners unfortunately die in the attack. And at this point, the SS decide to continue on foot. They shoot any prisoners who are incapable of walking, and then force the rest to continue marching on foot. This leaves 140 dead lying in Schwarzenfeld's train station, and the Americans are just hours away. So this is what brings us to the crisis of the story. The Americans arrive and find this horrific mass grave, and what they see is an atrocity of just mind-blowing proportions. They're traumatized by this, they're enraged, and they figure that Schwarzenfeld is full of Nazis and they hold the town responsible. And the commander of this American unit is furious. He issues a devastating ultimatum. The people of Schwarzenfeld are ordered to tend the victims in 24 hours. And if they fail, the Americans will execute German men in this town between 16 and 60. And if you wonder why 16 and 60, this is the age range of any combatant who would have been serving in the military or on the home front militia. To Schwarzenfeld's fortune, Father Victor is here. He musters every man, woman, and child to fulfill this ultimatum. He also confronts the Americans, his own countrymen, and defends the Germans. And when you read the book, you have the context to understand why he does this. This whole entire time throughout the war years, he's been counteracting Nazi indoctrination with passionist theology. He knows these people are not Nazis. And thanks to him, Schwarzenfeld is saved without a bullet fired.
Given all the factors that nearly ended Father Victor's mission in Germany, it seems like it was almost a miracle that he was here to stop this catastrophe.
Yeah, it really was. And suffice it to say, Schwarzenfeld is grateful to Father Victor, and for more reasons than one. After the war, he helped the townspeople emotionally and spiritually cope with the trauma they had endured. He pleaded for the release of German soldiers held in Allied POW camps. I mean, especially if the prisoners and their families were known to be conscientious objectors to National Socialism. And he arranged the delivery of care packages to Schwarzenfeld and delivered during a visit to the United States in 1947, he ran donation drives imploring American Catholics to donate goods to war-torn Germany. And in 1947, the town named him an Ehrenbürger. That's an honorary citizen of the town. This honor is common in Germany, but it is extremely rare to be given to foreigners. And when the town opened a new street that would serve as its major thoroughfare, officials named it Viktor Kochstrasse in his memory. And in 1995, during the 50th anniversary of events in Schwarzenfeld, the town erected this plaque on the edifice of the Miesbergkirche, the church where he had resisted his eviction, and it reads as follows: In gratitude to honorary citizen Father Viktor Koch, CP, Provincial of the Passionist Order, through personal engagement and civil courage, he prevented in April 1945 an act of retribution by U.S. troops upon the population of Schwarzenfeld.
Father Viktor clearly had a legacy in Germany. He also had an impact on his own family. Talk a little bit more about that.
Oh yeah, Father Viktor did have a very profound influence on our family. In my research, I've counted 10 family members who followed him into religious orders. And you see 4 of them here, all of whom became Passionists. On the far left, you see Father Gilbert Mailer, CP, his first cousin. He was a Monsignor and served in the Diocese of Columbus and Steubenville. Next is Father Benedict Huck, CP, his second cousin. This is the one everybody calls Huck. He was based in West Hoboken, New Jersey. To the right of Father Viktor is one of his nephews, Father Basil Bauer, CP. Father Basil is the son of Father Viktor's sister, Anna Cook Bauer. He served as a missionary in West Hunan, China for 28 years until the communist regime expelled him in 1952. He has his own story to tell. And on the far right is Father Roland Flaherty, CP, related through Father Viktor's youngest brother, Peter Cook. This photo was likely taken just a few months after Father Roland's ordination in April of 1947. At the end of that year, he traveled back to Germany with Father Viktor and worked in the German-Austrian province for 18 years. And the remaining 6 members of the family were nieces, all sisters of Father Basil Bauer. They became nuns in various orders, including the Passionist Sisters, the Sisters of St. Mercy, the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, and the School Sisters of Notre Dame.
One of the things that I find amazing is that no one in the family ever knew that Father Viktor went through these events. Back when I was a child, I knew that we had a relative who was a missionary in Germany, but that was about it. The story of how we found out is a story in and of its own.
Yeah, in all of the family letters from the 1940s, when his family asked him about the war, Father Viktor famously said, "It was a hard time, and I'm grateful that no harm came to me." This whole story that you're hearing right now, this nearly passed out of all knowledge. And the people who brought it back are the ones that you see here, especially the veteran on the left side of the screen, Ed Pancoast. Ed served in Patton's Third Army and spent some time in Schwarzenfeld long after these events took place. And he was part of the peacekeeping forces in Germany after the war. And during that time, he and his wife Eunice befriended Frau Zita Mueller and her husband Karl Hans, who you see in the picture on the lower right. For decades, they all completely avoided discussing the war, simply because they knew that it would dredge up bad memories, especially for the Germans. But in 1997, that changed. Ed and Eunice took a trip from their home in Maryland to visit Schwarzenfeld. And I'll bet he saw the plaque that had been affixed to the church just 2 years earlier. And he probably asked Zita what it was all about. Zita had been in Schwarzenfeld during the crisis, and she told Ed all about the spiritual hero from Sharon who saved the town. Ed was entranced. So he returned home to Maryland after that trip, determined to learn more about Zita's spiritual hero, and he began collecting research. It was his greatest wish that Father Viktor's story be memorialized in a novel or a movie. He even wrote Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, but unfortunately, they never responded. Ed was learning all of this in 2003 when he was 78 years old. He knew that bringing this story to light would require a massive research and writing effort, and he was far too late in life to manage that. So that summer, he packed up all of the research that he had gathered, and he sent it to the Sharon Genealogical Society, hoping that the city would acknowledge its native son. The Sharon genealogists were amazed, and they contacted the Sharon Herald, and that's how we found out. In August of 2003, through a chain of complete coincidences. The Koch family opened the newspaper one day and learned Father Viktor's story. My father, Gary, immediately got in touch with Ed, who was just overjoyed. The torch of his dreams passed to me. Sadly, Ed passed away in 2006, but he was confident that his dreams would eventually be realized. And you know that childhood game Telephone, where you line up a bunch of kids and whisper a story into the ear of the first one, and the story passes down to the end, and everyone laughs over how it got distorted through the telling? That's exactly what happened with Father Viktor's story between 1945 and 2003. We told the Schwarzenfelders what we had learned in the Sharon Herald article, and they just about died laughing because there were a lot of details that just kind of got, mangled in the retelling. So they invited us to the town in 2005, and their historian gathered eyewitnesses to speak to us. So this slide here shows at a glance the journey that I've been on since 2003. And I really have to give credit to my family. We turned many research trips into family vacations, and they've been with me at every step. And when people hear about American soldiers threatening German civilians, there's a very common remark that comes up, oh, our men would never do that. So I knew that it was going to be necessary for me to be more than a novelist. I knew that I had to be a historical researcher as well. So in 2004, we visited the Passionist Archives, where we got to know Father Rob Carbonneau, CP. And you see him standing in the middle there. He's the director of the archives and also a historian who got a PhD in history at Georgetown. He has been my guide on the Passionist side this whole time. And in 2005, we visited Schwarzenfeld, where I spoke with eyewitnesses who knew Father Viktor personally, and I got to hear their stories. In 2006, we went to the US National Archives to research the details of the American side of the story. In 2013, I had the terrific fortune of making contact with Dr. Chris Mariello from Salem State University in Massachusetts. He's the director of Holocaust and Genocide Studies. In 2013, he was conducting research on American forces discovering evidence of the Holocaust and their reactions and responses to the German population, resulting from that. So we both researched the ultimatum in Schwarzenfeld and co-presented a paper on the topic at a conference in 2013. In 2014, the Catholic Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania asked me to publish a paper in their journal, Gathered Fragments. And this paper, together with the conference paper, gave me the street cred that I needed as an independent historian. So I can honestly say that I have done the hardcore research to support this novel. So in 2024, 20 years later after all of that, we have The Sower of Black Field. And while it is a novel, it's deeply rooted in all of the research that I've done and all of the stories that I've heard from eyewitnesses. Basically, I just applied theme and character development to the history and used a little bit of fiction here and there to fill in holes that eyewitnesses had long since forgotten. And I'm delighted to say that the novel has been winning one award after another, especially in religious fiction. In fact, the awards that you see here on this screen are the ones that I could fit on the slide. To date, it has won 10 major awards in religious and historical fiction, 3 5-star reviews, and many accolades for best debut fiction.
You know what would be nice for people to know? How did you arrive at the title, The Sower of Black Field?
Okay, yeah. So on reflection, I realized that the name of the town, Schwarzenfeld, means black field in English. And the reason for that is the town is situated on the banks of a river called the Knob River. This river brings this rich black silt, and farmers depend upon it to nourish their crops. So the founders named the town Blackfield because of this rich, fertile soil. And while I was writing, I reflected on Christ's parable of the sower. As a preacher, Father Viktor would have been a sower of the word. The parable draws upon parallels between patches of soil and people receiving the seeds of God's word. The parable speaks of barren soil where seeds are immediately consumed by birds, and patches where seeds sprout but get choked by thorns. And to me, that sounds reminiscent of the reaction to National Socialist ideology. But finally, there are patches of fertile earth where the seeds sprout and produce a harvest. And I realized that the devout Catholics of Schwarzenfeld were just like those patches of earth that were fruitful. And that's how I got the name. So that's all we have for you tonight. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I've sent signed copies to of the novel to St. Joe's Bookstore, and they should be available for sale there. I hope you are inspired to pick up a copy or buy the novel on Amazon. It is available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. And if you have questions, visit my website or contact me at catherinecook.com/connect. Thank you for watching.
Good evening.